have you had any interactions with Ricardo or had any experiences in his events? You've been at some of his.
Yes.
Did you have any experiences?
Yeah, I did.
Wow.
I did in Monte Perdido. I went twice to Monte Perdido, and yes, because at night we used to sit outside on this light, how do you say this, air, open space, and behind was this very dense, very tall trees and forest, very dense forest, and behind that a mountain. So yes, I mean, I saw UFOs. I saw something coming very, very close over the trees, even like a light, ball of light, very big. And I also felt presences. I didn't see them myself, but other people saw presence. They saw a being standing behind our group, our circle, in the forest, and a being, tall, light, watching us. And when this person got closer, and then this person disappeared in the forest. Another person at the end of this meeting we all went to the parking place to get into our cars. And there was one car which was standing, and behind there was this ravine which was going down a little bit, and there was this very beautiful river, very full of water, you know. And so right there, a child saw again an entity, tall and like a light entity, more or less, who was watching us, and then disappeared back into the water or wherever behind that dune, you know. A part of that, yes, we saw several UFOs. I had also conversation. Personally, that was my thing, that I got messages, information.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. But I couldn't tell you what it was right now. But many people did. I mean, I am not the only one, because everybody gets very interesting experiences there. They say it's the main seat in Europe of the White Brotherhood. So like Mount Shasta is in America, here it's Monte Perdido in the Pyramids. It's a beautiful area, very nice.
Wow.
So they say inside the mountain is the you know, like a camp, like a hub of the White Brotherhood in Europe, the main one. I mean, I guess there are many other ones too.
Wow. Fascinating stories. Fascinating.
Yeah, that's why he goes there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, let's move on to your other question I wanted to ask you about is this Atacama being that has gotten sort of a lot of attention lately. You've had some involvement with that. Can you maybe tell me what your involvement is and what you think is going on?
Yes. My involvement was, as I mentioned before, I met Paula 2008, and also Stephen Greer and so on. I was at the time, the reason how I met them all is because at the time I had a big 4x4 wheel drive, big car, a Nissan. So there was lots of space, and these friends of mine who were organizing this event, they asked me, please, and then as you speak so many languages, I speak 5 languages, so they said, please, can you help us to go and greet the guests at the airport and bring them to Sitges, to the hotel.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'd love to do that. Good. So that's how I met also Stephen Greer, amongst all the others, and Klaus Dorner and everybody who was there. And so then later on, he always kept inviting me to come to America, and you know. And then later on, a few years later, I think it was 2012, if I remember. What happened? He came back again, and Paula asked me if I could do him a favor, and he was looking for someone to translate Spanish to English.
Okay.
And because he was going to come for 3 days together with his team, with Emery Smith, Dr.
Okay.
Emery Smith, and Dr. Jane Bravo. So the three of them arrived at the airport, and immediately Emery was the one who was filming everything. And so that day we met also with the owner of this being, the Atacama being. He calls it the anthropomorphic being of Atacama. And so then first thing we did, we had dinner the next day. We went immediately to the Clínica Monchón. Clínica Monchón is a clinic where they do the TAC and all the scanning and so on. So this little being was then being scanned there. And while it was being scanned there, it was interesting because the person who was scanning it said, "Oh my God, we never had such a small being here, because this is normally for human beings. But this here, we have a 14 centimeters little being being scanned in a scan, which is huge for a human being." Anyway, so it was a unique experience for them. And one of these people was a Peruvian. And now I'm going to tell you something very interesting. There was this Peruvian. I don't know, so, oh, Peru, hello. I started talking with him and chatting, because I grew up in Chile.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So until I was 15, I grew up in there. So, all the South Americans there, I have a good feeling for them. And so he was telling me at the time that very quietly he was saying, "We know these beings." "What do you mean you know these beings?" He said, "Yeah, we know these beings. They exist there, And then what happened is 2 years later, I went there to have a pantomographia, which it's a scan, a tag for teeth, for the dentist.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I went there and I saw him again. I thought, hey, you remember? I said, "Yeah, of course I do." And he said, "Yeah, I remember about the little being." He said, "Yes, I have to tell you something." Now we had a bit more time. So he told me the story that his mother grew up in Tacna. Tacna is near Peru, on the border, Peru and Chile. And there, my mother was from there. And my mother told me that when she was younger, that she used to walk in the dunes, and it's in the sand, it's desert, it's very dry. And in the evening, especially when you walk around there, suddenly she used to see these beings. And these are very small beings. When they're adults, they're about between 35 and 40 centimeters.
Okay. Yeah.
But this one here was a child. So this was, it was told also by a doctor in America. It was said that it was a child equivalent of 7 to 8 years old.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he said these beings existed there. So now I came back and became quite friendly with the owner. He called Ramon Navia Osorio Vilar. So Ramon, from time to time we met and we talked, and I also invited him once to a very big conference we gave here. So we stayed in touch, and I had this little being in my hand at the time.
Wow.
It is so tiny, and I must say, when I saw it and I had it in my hand, it weighs like a feather.
Wow.
And then I noticed that the ribs, the hands and the arm, no, especially the fingers in the hand, they had little tubes instead of bones. So there were probably bones inside holding those tubes. So each part of the finger was a tube. Yeah.
Okay.
So like little tube. Then the other thing is, the strange thing is that head. Oh. There's too much to talk about. The head, I've never seen a head like that. And I was blown away by the head. Why? Because I studied physiognomy. I'm a portrait painter. I'm interested in people. I'm interested in shape and form and why do people look the way they are. And I know now why, because everything is formed by your personality.
Okay.
Personality, how you sound you, because your personality is sound.
Yeah.
Light and sound. So therefore, now what happened is this little being has a head which is 1/3 of the body is the head.
Wow.
Huge, 1/3. The legs are just 1/3 of the body again, and the second third is just the torso.
Yeah.
So I thought, wow. And the head was so big, and it had this amazing shape like that. And on top, it has a crest, like a crest, a bony crest. And as it had that shape on the very top, I knew, wow, this being, these are very spiritual beings. They are connected to the universe. I mean, these are not just anybody. These are not like us. I mean, these are very conscious beings. They're small in size, but it doesn't matter. But I was so intrigued. And then besides that, it had such a lovely smile on its face. It has been, damaged. Obviously, the head was slightly damaged. But, and it has those huge eyes.
Yeah.
And it has many other anomalies, which are totally different than a human being. A part of that, it has only 9 ribs instead of 12. And the legs are very short, very small. Anyway, there are many other anomalies. So,
can I ask, because I always wondered, you held the being in your hand. Did this thing have teeth?
Don't remember.
Because that's the key. If it's a fetus, it won't have teeth. I had read someplace that it did have teeth, but
I'm sure it had teeth. I would have to look at it again because it had a big mouth. It was like the mouth was very, as if it had big lips.
Okay.
And it was a bit like together like that. So it's not that you could clearly see the teeth, let's say. It wasn't teeth. But I'm sure I can ask Ramon. I mean, definitely, I can go and see it again. He has it there. But I can answer that question for next time if you like.
Wow, beautiful.
But not only that, this being has been walking, because if it would be a fetus, it would be soft. It wouldn't have had bones. I mean, these bones have been pounding on the earth.
Yeah.
You can see that. I mean, it's definitely not a fetus. And
what was your feeling when you first held the thing, or when you first saw it? What did you instinctively think when you saw it? Were you overwhelmed by this little being?
I was very overwhelmed, very. I was emotional. I was overwhelmed. I felt a lot of love for it, or coming from it, I don't know. But I felt this was a very, very spiritual, very loving being,
Wow.
And pretty obvious. Anyway, but that was my experience. I have got a fabulous report here from Ramon, very interesting, which I can read to you another time. Maybe, I don't know if I have enough time, or I can send it to you.
Yes.
If you like.
Okay. Let's do that.
Send it to you, because I really was all these last 3 days just translating it. I mean, first of all, I recorded him into Spanish, then I wrote it all in Spanish, and then I translated it into English. So I've had it just finished. So but it's difficult to read it if we are just chatting like that. But if you like, I can read it send it to you, because this is going to be the material I will be talking about in more length at the conference, maybe.
Wow. How many different types of scientists have looked at it in Spain? There was Gruner took his material. Who else has looked at the being?
Many in Spain, many in Barcelona, in Granada, in Sevilla, in Madrid. I mean, so many. And a part of that, many abroad too. I have it all written down here. But, until I find it now,
Wow.
you know what I mean? It's a lot of material here. He has got, this man is a fascinating man, very interesting, because he went there since he was young to South America and spent years there. And he even spent several years also in Colombia and in Peru and especially also in Chile, north of Chile. And in Colombia, he had a company, he had a big company which were building motorways and airports.
Okay.
So he had a lot of contact with people there about the subject, and they are also seen in Colombia. They were found in Colombia just as in Peru and I'm sure in Ecuador too, and in Chile. So this whole area, they are known there.
Yeah.
And in Chile, they are called the Gentiles.
Wow.
They call them the Gentiles, and they lived together with the Aymara. You know, the Aymara race, the ancient Inca, Indian Aymara from Peru, Bolivia, northern Chile, and a little bit of Argentina. So there was that was the area of the Aymaras, and the Aymaras cohabited with them. They seem to have had little villages with little terraces where they used to cultivate their vegetables.
Wow.
And they lived inside in caves. But they were separate, but nobody interfered with them. They respected each other. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the thing is, he says these beings are there even today. What does it mean? Yes, they are not human, but that may be the case that at one time in the past, who knows how long ago, maybe 50 years, 1,000 years ago, whoever, whatever, doesn't matter. These beings came on this planet and probably, like it happened to so many UFOs, crashed here. Crash landed, whatever, maybe, and they got stuck here. And since then, they have made everything possible to survive on this planet and live away from human beings. They normally don't like to mix with human beings. And the other thing is they are very small and they are nocturnal beings. They only go out at night because they are small and there are so many condors and big birds and animals who could be dangerous for them, so they only come out at night. And he said you can see it on the shape of not the shape, but the
size,
the protrusion. I mean, it goes inside the concave, and the depth of their ocular hole cavity is typical of a being which is more nocturnal than daytime people. And so the other thing he said, when the Spaniards came from, in the conquistadores in those in the 16th century and so on, they brought with them an illness, and they brought their illnesses with them. So a lot of Indians, Aymaras, and those little beings died from their infections. I mean, they were infected with these illnesses they didn't have there. They didn't exist before. Just like the Europeans brought syphilis from South America or from Latin America over to Europe. That was the first time syphilis came to Europe. Anyways, so these beings then retreated themselves, they retrieved and went high up into the altiplano, into the height of the very high up in the Andes, more than 4,200 meters high. So they would be far away from human beings.
Wow. Well, what's your story on where the being came from. How do you understand how the being was it discovered? Where was it discovered?
Yeah. So that story exactly. That was my last big question I asked Ramon yesterday. So I'm going to read it to you. So he said to me, the being was discovered in mid-2003 by a huaquero. Huaquero is like a cowboy or whatever, who was looking for old objects among the ruins of a place anyway, not archaeological ruins or remains, but he was looking for old household stuff abandoned into a salt mine offices, because there used to be in Iquique. There used to be salt mines there, and then so there were the offices that were all abandoned, so they were always looking, scavenging for stuff remains. At the beginning of 2004, now he says, Ramon, I was able to contemplate it in Iquique, and the Bolivian doctor, Raúl Artesana, whatever, certified its authenticity and its strangeness, as well as some genetic anomalies. The huaquero, called Oscar Muñoz, sold this being to Ricardo Clotet, who had it for a few months and began to offer it on television and on other Chilean groups. I think it was also offered to certain foreign groups as well. It was not easy. Although in our knowledge today, this type of anatomy was unknown to us, we believe that the specimen deserved a broad and in-depth study. Observing it as it was in those moments, the investigation was a risk, but we acquired it nevertheless.
Okay.
The being was acquired in Barcelona in 2004. It was received at the Academy of Sciences of Barcelona. Some outstanding members of the University of Barcelona were present. The objective was to achieve a certification of the specimen. And then he says, yes, this being walked, according to Dr. Laughlin from America, very famous Dr. Laughlin, he would have been between 6 and 8 years old. That was his first statement.
Yeah.
It measured about 14 centimeters. According to the Aymara people, these beings lived near them, but they did not mix. These beings had a little town of nocturnal habits, given its fragility, and as they were exposed to the great birds, such as condors, etc., is for that reason they had to have a nocturnal life. You only need to look at the eye sockets. They are deep. The town of the small beings was called as Los Gentiles. When the Spaniards arrived, well, anyway, I already told you that. So Dr. Greer, so how he met Dr. Greer. In 2007, I met Dr. Greer, although before he had already corresponded through Dr. Bravo. I had already corresponded through Dr. Bravo. I showed him the x-rays and analysis that had been made, and it was clear that a deep study would have to be done, since this anatomy did not coincide with the human one. This aspect has been expressed by many doctors. In 2012, he returned to Barcelona together with his team, Dr. Emery Smith and Dr. Jane Bravo, and samples were taken for the study of the DNA through the Stanford University.
Yeah.
And so then he said he had previously taken samples to Dallas, Texas, but according to the doctors who intervened, they believed that it was not enough material. So he came back later with his team in 2012. That's when I was there with them. Uh-huh. And taking advantage of the stay, several tests were performed at the Monchon Clinic. Amongst them, anyway, the rest, one of his, I told you already, these Tacna, Chilean, anyway, I don't, it's too much stuff. But there's a lot of interesting material also where he talks about Dr. Nolan. And I think we need to go more into the, I don't know how much time we have.
Well, this is interesting. Keep going.
Yeah, is that okay?
Yes.
Oh, you can always cut it or whatever. Yeah. Shall I talk to you about Nolan, or shall I talk to you about anomalies in Chile in that area?
Let's talk about Nolan.
Nolan. Hold on a second. It's Nolan now. Here. Okay. This one I haven't yet cleaned it up in my English, but anyway, roughly. So USA. So what is the significance difference between the first Stanford University report and the second one? Yeah, that was my question to him.
Okay.
To Ramon, and he said both the first and the second, there were several irregularities. First of all, they were mistaken in the sex of the specimen, according to the specimen, although later they corrected it. So they first, they stated that the specimen corresponded to a fetus of 7 weeks and that it was human.
Yeah.
Although I leave some loose ends. Anyway, final report was frankly embarrassing when I compare it to the television series fashionable at the time. In the second report, he says, I lift him from his mother. Yeah, they lift him from his mother's tomb. Womb, sorry. So that means suddenly it was not anymore a fetus, and it had no longer 7 weeks, but it was about to be born. A breakthrough, although he still has got some years left. In the university that the doctors visited, they looked at the series of bones from the back and in other formations. He asked me, no, sorry, it's too bad. I translated it first with Google, and I still have to go through it. I didn't have time to finish it. So he said, there was this thing, following the second report, I sent an email to Dr. Garry Nolan, who had always answered me by answering my questions. On this occasion, I received an unusual response, by why were there so many changes, before it was a 7 weeks old fetus, then it was 9 months old and almost being born, and then Dr. Laughlin had said already at the very beginning, at the very first one for 2 years, that it was a child equivalent of 7 to 8 years old. And then he said, he said, you have to bury this being. So I was quite amazed, he said, Ramon said, because it was the same suggestion that some Aymaras had asked me. Dr. Nolan, he said, I suppose that after my mail, you will have written to all the museums in the world to bury the mummies that they took from their sacred burials, and that they return the value of the tickets to give it a sacred burial. Known, by the way, that the Atacama being was not caught in any spaceship, not even in a cemetery, it was found in a rubbish bin of a population in ruin. So that area was in a ruin. So it was a rubbish pile where it went to stop everything unusable. Everything which was not used was ending there in a pile. So that's where it was found by this Huaquero. A short time later, I learned that he had been struck by a study of an archaeological... I have to stop here because, as I say, Nolan then didn't respond anymore.
Okay.
So after that, no response, no answer. And then he going another criteria. Yeah. Is there an anonymity of criteria? Not at all. While Dr. Garry Nolan clung to the fact that it was a fetus, Dr. Ralph Laughlin claimed that he walked. Dr. Laughlin sent a letter to Dr. Nolan setting such an end. I mean, to such an end. I mean, they were discussing this whole thing between them. However, after a few years having said that, Dr. Laughlin, a couple of years or I don't know how many, then he changed his mind. We know that these things happen. So he also then suddenly said it was a fetus, after having already declared that it was a child. So, and then he said, we know these things happen when there are issues at stake. What are the issues? Everything that is not previously catalogued.
Yeah.
So I wrote a long letter to Dr. Laughlin and asked him, among other things, on what were these radical changes based. Did not answer.
Wow.
Something big must have happened for a man with a history like his to change his mind. Keep in mind that Dr. Nolan's second report went from fetus to almost baby. As much as it is indicated to the wise doctors that the fetus had the fontanelle closed. That's interesting. The fetus, if it was a fetus, it would not have had the fontanelle closed. You know, fetuses have it open, babies have it open. It's only when born that they close as a human being too. So it's obvious that this being had lived on this earth outside the womb of his mother because his fontanelle was closed. And he kept saying that, pointing it out to the doctors and everyone, but they didn't listen.
Yeah.
They didn't want to listen to that. So because, and then the other thing is, Ramon always was very open about it and said these beings live still today. They are not just came with a spaceship and crashed here. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They may be alien, yes, that there are ETs. I mean, so are we. We talk about that. You know what I mean? But these are pure ones. I mean, they're not mixed like us.
Where do we go from here? What is Ramon? Is there any other avenues that are going to be pursued to investigate again, or is it over?
So far, I mean, there are still lots of professors and scientists coming over to visit him, to see it and samples and so on. But I think so far this matter, I mean, he has said everything he can and people are saying nonsense. He has gone through very deep, difficult times lately because all this huge palaver which came out of this put him in a very difficult position because now even the Chilean government is causing problems to him.
Yeah.
Because they were put under pressure from the authorities. Mm-hmm. Now they're saying that, first of all, he took something out which was archaeological, which is not the case. And then they found out it died 40 years ago. So, I mean, that's not archaeological.
Yeah.
He can prove there are lots of people who have seen these beings. They still exist today. So again, it's not an archaeological thing. That it is unusual, that it is not like us, and that it's not a humanoid, that's pretty clear. Yeah? And that maybe at some point, most probably, it landed from another planet, wherever they came from. Yeah. Yes. And I mean, we have those beings even in China and all over the world. They find, the drupas or whatever they were called, they crash landed there. We have got the Antarctica. We find these beings who crash landed there from Saturn and Mars and whatever. So one more. But this is a very specific one and it's very tiny. It's different.
Yeah.
So what happens is now they have made such problems to him because of all that, saying that he has to prove that he has got a permit bring it out of the country. But he said he didn't bring it out of the country. It was brought into here, it was sent here, and it was given to him, passed on to him in Barcelona. So, they're looking for ways of getting at him now because they don't want this to come out. I mean, what is the fear? What is it just doesn't make sense. Those beings still here now. They're still here now. So,
wow.
I know Stephen Greer wanted to make it a bit story that it came from a big ET story. Yeah, but he didn't want to listen to him when he said they're still here now.
Yeah.
Because that would change the story of Sirius or whatever, the movie.
Wow. Well, we can update this. Can you do my radio show down the road?